All right, it being 6:30, I'm going to call to order a meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It is Monday, August 23rd, and we are in the OSD Innovation Center at Oregon High School. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bijak? Here. Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Maring?
Here.
Dr. Lakuta? Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Pankratz?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Present. The board does have a quorum, and Dr. Lakuta did inform me ahead of time that she was out of town, so she would not be able to be here. We do have proof of notice that this meeting has been posted. If anyone is interested in seeing that, it is right here with me or with Katie. We do have a full agenda tonight. We have a consent calendar. We have some information items which will include public comment for those who are registered to speak. We do have a public hearing this evening, and then we do have some action items, and then we'll move into our discussion items and information items before closing. The board will also go into closed session tonight, and we may or may not, based on the closed session, come back into open session. So that is our evening tonight. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I will make that motion.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Mr. Maring?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes. Motion carries 6-0. We do have an agenda. Next is the consent calendar. Are there any items on the consent calendar that any board member wishes to remove? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Maring?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Moving on to B, information items. Next on the agenda is public comment. And just for those in the audience, public comment is a part of policy 180.05, which states that any district resident shall have the right to address the board. The board shall schedule 15 minutes at the beginning of each regular board meeting for members of the public to speak. This time period may be extended for up to 1 hour at the discretion of the president. And the president may limit the amount of time that each person may speak. Each person, when called upon, will give their name and address and the name of the group they represent, if applicable. So what we'll do is I'll read the names of people on the order that which they signed in. So we'll have you come up to the table, and you'll have 3 minutes. And so Ms. Heights will hold up a yellow card when you have 30 seconds left, and then the red card when your time is up. So we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. Also, because we are under a health order, we do require anybody in the room tonight to wear a mask. We'll get started with, first on the list is Kimberly Anderson. Kimberly, you are up.
Some of you two over there. Put the mask on, please.
You should be all set now, Kim.
Thanks. Hi, Kimberly Anderson, 480 Medina Street. I wanted to express my concern about the fact that asking children to wear masks is being equated to child abuse. I understand that wearing a mask is irritating and uncomfortable. I would hate if anything we asked our children to do that made them uncomfortable was then classified as abuse. I'm certain this is not the lesson I want my children learning. And out of discomfort comes the greatest amount of growth. These meetings do not happen in a vacuum. So what we say in here is repeated out in our community. I do not want students who are suffering physical abuse and neglect to feel as though what they are enduring is diminished because it is categorized in the same way that being required to wear a mask is categorized. Additionally, like we have seen happen with the term bullying, these terms become red flag words that attract a lot of attention and elicit an immediate response for fear of being seen as condoning the behavior. Bullying came to include any behavior that when a child was mean to another, to the detriment of children who are experiencing actual bullying. I do not want to see this happen to the term child abuse. My second point lies in the request to prioritize the well-being of the teachers and staff at OSD. If you ask anyone who has children why they moved to Oregon, the response is inevitably the school district. From a broad perspective, that implies that homeowners, parents, and guardians believe that decisions made by the school leadership and imparted by the teachers thus far have led to a stellar education for the children of Oregon. This led me to think about what has caused such anger in our community in the last 18 months, that parents are now questioning the school board, administrative team, teachers, and staff. Anger is a secondary emotion. For data people, there's a ton of research on the subject. Anger comes secondary to fear and hurt. And typically, the more one of those you feel, the greater your expression of anger. The best analogy that I could come up with was to think about when your kids were little and they would race towards the road. If no car was coming and you were anything like me, you swooped up the child and scolded them in an angry tone. Now, same scenario, but a car is coming. The closer the call, the greater the intensity of the emotion, typically the angrier the reaction. Juxtapose that scenario to the current situation, and the louder someone screams and the angrier they are, it would go to reason the more fearful they are. But of what? In the past year and a half, one of the things that has been such a great loss for so many of us, especially the middle class, is the loss of control. I encourage the board to look at what parents can control during this time, while still maintaining the health of all Oregon students, and providing the type of education that has given our school district the reputation it has. But again, what happens in here does not happen in a vacuum. Teachers are returning to their classrooms after a very short summer of reprieve to an incredibly long and stressful school year. And what they hear in these meetings has repercussions. I want to remind the board that even though it should go without saying, in the current climate, I feel this needs to be said. We have amazing teachers who are bright, dedicated, and driven. We need to support them, and we need to remind them they are valued and appreciated. I would like to see the mental and physical well-being of our teachers remain a focal point this year as the Delta variant impacts our community and the battle of masks and CRT continues. My fear, if we do not, is that we will lose these individuals who are the reason that we
Kimberly,
have such a stellar reputation.
Your time is up. Okay, thank you. Next up is Amelia Dyer.
Good evening. My name is Amelia Dyer, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a junior at the high school, and I live on State Street. First off, I'd like to thank Dr. Bergstrom, the school board, administration, teachers, and staff for their hard work and dedication. I felt that I was able to learn last year, and I appreciated the support of my teachers. Thank you for following the guidance from the CDC and PHMDC. Requiring masks, even for the vaccinated students and staff, will keep everyone safe and keep Oregon on the right track. One of the main priorities of the Back Together plan is mental and physical wellness, which I can say that the district has done a fantastic job of addressing both. Mental health is a topic that everyone around the globe learned more about during the pandemic, allowing us to reach out to others who needed support. Cultivating a school environment that is emotionally and physically safe for all allows students to feel more open to share their truth. The school district has worked incredibly hard to emphasize this idea, and I look forward to seeing it grow. I would also like to thank you for prioritizing equity and inclusion on our schools, curriculum, and involving students in this process. The inclusive students created using the Learning for Justice standards and made by other groups have already made a difference in how Oregon students learn. In my experience, it's important to me that Oregon continues to deliver these lessons and more because becoming aware of new perspectives has allowed me to gain a deeper understanding of cultures and identities. Learning through a critical, intersectional lens throughout the past year in my personal life and at school has taught me more than ever before. This is what gives me the drive to go out in the community and make it a better place for everyone. There are so many resources out there, and representing our systematically marginalized and excluded students is crucial. Student groups like the Multicultural Student Union, Gender Sexuality Alliance, and Allies in Action are becoming more involved in the work of equity throughout the school district. At the high school level, I would like to remind you that we are always willing to ensure that there are steps being taken to improve the community. We will advocate for the voices of the underrepresented students and make sure they are taken into account. I have seen immense progress in our education, and one of my hopes for this year is that the district will continue to address inequities in the community and hold itself accountable. We need to be JEDI, an acronym for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. We should be warriors that stand up for these ideas. Thank you, and I look forward to all the progress we'll make this school year.
Jen Hands is next.
Hey there. My name is Jen Hans. I live in Fitchburg. First, I wanted to say thank you for approving the requirement for kids to wear masks in school. Last week, Dr. Bergstrom explained that the public health policy is to no longer require a child to quarantine if both the close contact and the child were wearing masks. For example, my child wearing a mask goes to school and sits next to another child who is not wearing a mask. The maskless child tests positive for COVID. My child now needs to miss a week or more of school because the other child did not wear a mask. His right to go to school in a safe environment was taken away from him because another child's parents told them not to wear a mask. Where is my child's choice? Where are the choices of the parents who do not have the flexibility to have an inconsistent school schedule where their child will be out of school sporadically and with short notice? I am grateful for a policy that will keep more kids in school. Last year, a child was out of school more than 2,000 times due to quarantining. And that 2,000 times was in a school year where we did not have everyone in class together, nor full-time 5 days a week, and a less transmissible virus strain. Finally, on a different topic, I love that the message coming from staff to students is that they see everyone and they are all valued. I am grateful that my child is receiving an education that includes recognizing his feelings and experiences and those of others around him, specifically coming from SEL lessons and diversity and equity lessons. Because there are so many adults in the world that do not know how they interact in the world matters, nor how to recognize their own emotions. Nor do they know that words matter. And when you know better, you should do better. When the well-being of our kids in our community, especially ones that don't fit into the traditional mold, depends on our words, we must do better now. When a child suddenly sees himself in a book, has their feelings about their body and their emotions validated and told they are normal, that is powerful and that saves lives. Children cannot learn academics without feeling included and safe, and one does not come without the other. Thank you.
Next is Coral Joplin. Did I say that right?
It's Joplin.
Goblin, I'm sorry.
No, it's,
Coral Goblin.
it's totally fine. So I'm Coral Joplin. I live at 837 Peace Lane. And I would just like to start by saying thank you for your willingness to serve our community in this way. As the mom of 2 kids who are too young to get a COVID vaccine yet, I am so grateful for the district's work to allow their busy minds and bodies a safe way to be present in school in a few weeks. Today I'd like to share some concerns I have regarding our SRO contract and to request your critical thought as we continue to refine that relationship. So we state that the mission of our SRO is to improve safety and the educational climate. The Journal of the American Medical Association published a study this February covering 40 years of data on school shootings. And they showed that armed guards were not associated with a significant reduction in injuries. And in fact, a quote, controlling for aforementioned factors of location and school characteristics, the rate of deaths was 2.83 times greater in schools with an armed guard present. Given that, I would like to know what significant differences in our program could lead us to be the exception. With regard to safety and educational climate, studies also show that SROs lead to lower feelings of safety, which I know has been shared with you in the past by kids of color from our own district, and higher rates of suspension and expulsion, particularly for kids of color. With that in mind, I reviewed our goals and strategies, and I observed commitments and trainings to quotas of interactions, but no measurable statistics of outcomes. What are the measurable safety outcomes for our SRO? How are you reviewing data to ensure that policing is enforced without bias? Equity requires hard conversations and not just a prescribed interaction at lunch. Finally, I am particularly concerned about SRO present in student safe places, such as connections classes. As a law enforcement officer, our SRO is an authority figure with, as our agreements outline, responsibilities according to state and federal law. In my adult life at work, power dynamics like this are explicitly called out and acknowledged. My therapist tells me what they're required to report. My boss can't accept gifts from me. In day-to-day life, an on-call officer does not insert themselves into my coffee date with my trusted friend. Within the SRO and student power dynamic, how is my child able or free to express informed consent to an officer of the law in their safe place? Please continue to push for stronger delineations and boundaries as you refine this agreement. And really, thank you so much for the work you do.
Next up is Matthew Payne.
Hello, Matthew Payne, 140 Lynn Trail. I have 2 kids in Prairie View this fall. I also served on the medical working group as a data guy. I didn't really bring much data to that group, to be honest. The other guy did. But I do have some data today. 67% is the data that I'm going to talk about. This spring we had 2 school board elections. I would argue the main choices on that election were candidates who were going to follow science, promote inclusivity, promote diversity, promote some of the stuff that other people have talked about. 67% of Oregon chose those candidates. That's more than double the number of people who wanted to go, let's say, the other way, to put it nicely. We've had a lot of people come to this group and be rude, yell, whatever you want to say, to get their point across. You guys listened, but I'm here to say there's also the 2/3 of Oregon that support what you're doing. We appreciate the decisions that you're making, and you should keep doing them. That's why we elected you. Thanks.
Martha Klug is next.
Hello, 351 Oakwood in Oregon. I first want to publicly thank the school board and administrative team for all your efforts to do what's best for students in the district. I have watched through the pandemic as this district has made decisions and given options to families so that learning could continue in a safe manner. My family opted to do Oregon online, and while it couldn't measure up to being in person, my children received quality education that kept them on track, and I will be forever grateful. According to a joint report from the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Children's Hospital Association, as of August 5th, 371 children have died from COVID-19 in the United States. Some would claim that is a small number, but I know it doesn't feel like a small number to the families whose children have passed. 0 children have died from wearing a mask. I personally know of 5 Oregon school district students suffering with long-term complications of COVID. That's just the people that I know personally that are close enough to me to share their children's medical information with me. I don't have a statistic for long haulers in Oregon, but my personal knowledge of it alarms me. COVID is affecting children, and we need to continue to take protective measures. I hear other parents asking you to give them a choice, and I wish it were that simple. I really do. I wish we could each make our own decisions because we each know what's best for our family. But it isn't simple. The effectiveness, proven by the majority of studies done on masks, depends on everyone wearing them, not just those who choose to do so. When and if the county mandate changes and you're left to enforce masks on your own standing, please remember that giving one parent a choice to not mask their child takes away another parent's choice for having their child attend a school that supports proven scientific safety measures for all students. It's not my child that I want to wear a mask. It's that child that will inevitably be sent to school with COVID that I want to wear a mask. If that is my child, of course I'm grateful for the reduced transmission. No child's life or quality of life is less valuable than the temporary discomfort or social inconveniences of wearing a mask. As appreciative as I am for the school district, I don't trust you all to make decisions regarding my family's health. I do trust you, however, to look at the experts on matters of student wellness and make informed decisions based on sound medical advice from parties entitled to give that advice. Separately, thank you for the gender-inclusive language and diversity lessons in the curriculum.
Next up is Matt Ledbetter.
Hello, my name's Matt Ledbetter. I live on Sumac Street. I want to start by saying I hate masks. I don't like wearing them. But as a parent of a kid going to 4K next year, I am very grateful that y'all have made the choice to require masks in school. We are in a time where there are parts of our country where there are no pediatric beds for kids to go to the hospital. Who on earth thinks that that is a good thing? These places are where masks are not required, and that the current variant of the COVID virus is spreading widely. Exposing our kids to that is the next thing short of insanity to me. As Martha just brought up, there are hundreds of kids who have died. What number is high enough for those folks who don't agree with masks? Is it another 100? Is it another 500? I mean, how many kids exactly do you want to die? So at this point, all I can say is there are people who are experts in epidemiology, illness, pediatric care, who have all said the right thing to do is to have kids wear masks in school. Until people can get over their me attitude that my 3-year-old son had, they should be disregarded, and you should follow the science that is going to keep everyone safe, healthy, and able to participate in school in person. That will help our kids be the most successful. Thank you.
Beth Malcook?
Hi. I'm definitely going to offer a different perspective tonight. So my name is Beth Malcook. I'm a taxpayer and a parent in the Oregon School District. And I guess I want to start off by sharing what it feels like to be a parent who has a bee in their bonnet, as Bill Forrester from School Perceptions called us in his report last week. It appears that the parents who don't agree with the decisions that are being made in general are now being labeled as having a bee in their bonnet by an expert who taxpayers are paying to give our school district neutral feedback on our district's performance. I'd like to say it's shocking, but unfortunately it feels pretty consistent with the way some parents have felt brushed off when they sit up here and they pour their hearts out to you when they have a different opinion. We're asking for you to listen to us, and we'd actually love a response. We're asking to partner with you in making a decision that affects our children 8 hours a day, approximately 240 days a year. When we send you an email or sit here and share our ideas, we feel dismissed. So based on last month's meeting, it appeared that a decision was made that our school board would start taking varying scientific studies and resources into account when making decisions for our kids. And I think that's an awesome idea. And if that's the case, I would request that you clearly communicate to parents where you are getting the information you base your decisions on and the resources that you are utilizing. Not just the canned PHMDC said it response, but additional research. I would like for you to prove to us as parents that masks are not only effective, but they're also healthy for our children to wear 8 hours a day. As parents, we deserve that if you're going to force our kids to wear masks on their face, I'd encourage you to do also some serious research on the social, psychological, and emotional impact that masks have on children. I know that's not a popular opinion tonight. As a parent and taxpayer in this district, I'd also like to request that each school board member consistently use your elected power to vote on issues. When I met with Leslie Bergstrom and asked her why we are one of the only school boards in the state of Wisconsin where school boards do not vote on every issue at every meeting, she told me that there are issues where the board can choose to follow her recommendations and when they choose to put it to a vote, but they always have the right to put something to a vote. If you have this right, why isn't it consistently exercised? Why do we elect you to represent our school district if you're going to leave the decision making up to one person? Why don't you each openly share your opinions and your position on issues concerning our children so our school district and taxpayers and parents know what you stand for? I've lived in this district for 11 years. I chose this district over my alma mater, Middleton High School, because I heard amazing things about this school district. I believe that the people and the school board members were kind and focused on the best interest of all of our children and their education, not their own personal or political interests.
Beth, your time is up.
Okay, I'm just gonna wrap up by saying that I went to school and was trained as an educator 24 years ago. I have a master's in social work and certified in schools. And what's going
Beth,
on right
your time
now
is
is
up.
not what I recognize from my education.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Next up is Jacqueline Kamen. I'm going to pass it. Okay. Thank Next up is Karen Davidson.
Hi, I'm Karen Davidson, and I live in Oregon. Most of my comments are regarding the SRO agreement, but I'd also like to thank you for making your decision about requiring masking for everyone in schools so we can maximize our children's time at school 5 days a week. And considering the school resource officer agreement, I think it is important to continually reevaluate whether there are ways to meet the needs of students in ways that are better than retaining a school resource officer, and if there are better ways to allocate funding so that teachers and students feel supported. I also think it is important to consider that there is evidence there are student populations that historically have been or felt less safe with an SRO presence or police presence, such as Black students and disabled students. For example, Black high school students are twice as likely to be suspended as white or Hispanic high school students. Students with a disability are also twice as likely to be suspended as those without a disability. Kids with learning and behavioral disabilities are also incarcerated at nearly 3 times the rate of the overall youth population. I think that there are better solutions available to create a healthy and safe school environment and that take a holistic approach to discipline. It's important to recognize that kids' behavior on the outside can often be a barometer of how well they are doing or not doing. I'm so glad our school district recognizes the importance of social emotional learning and is investing in it, and I think that is good progress. I'd love to see the money currently spent on an SRO instead invested in as many social emotional and mental health programs and supports as possible, along with continued training and support for teachers in non-punitive discipline methods. If the district continues to retain an SRO, I recommend that the school resource officer be familiar with and trained in all programs available in the school district that adopt non-punitive approaches to discipline. If a school has implemented a specific program designed to improve overall school climate or respond to student behaviors in specific ways, the SRO should participate in all trainings associated with that program. I also specifically take issue with Section 8C of the current SRO agreement that says the child's parents or guardians shall be notified if the child has been taken into custody as soon as it is practicable. I think that this should be revised to include that no questioning will take place without first notifying the child's parents or guardians. Thank you.
All right, that concludes our public comment. Thank you to all who registered to speak. I think that's all right, Katie? Okay. Moving on, information B2 OEA report. Do we have a representative from the OEA here tonight? Okay, guess not. And we do not have a student report as school is not in session. So we are now moving to C on the agenda, public hearing and action item. Let me just get my notes here. And so we're going to have a public hearing pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 121.553 and Statute 118.38 regarding the district's proposal to request the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction waive the 2021-22 calculation for parent transportation contract payment due to a temporary fluctuation in the district's costs and enrollment related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and instead offer contracts using the 2020-2021 school year amount. So we'll have a hearing first, and then once the conclusion of the hearing, we will move on to consideration of an action item. As a legal point of interest, Kevin?
Yes, I must recuse myself as I have a conflict of interest with a child in private school.
Okay, for that public conflict of interest, Kevin will leave the table for the duration of the discussion and vote, and then he will return once that's over. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom and Mr. Weiland.
So one of the things that we're required to do is provide parent contracts for transportation for private school students if that school is within 5 miles of our border. This year, that number almost doubled based on, or actually did double, based on the suppressed number of riders that we had last year. So the impact of that, based on what we know right now, would cost the district an additional $18,000 for this next year. And this has recently become known to all the school districts kind of in the state. Department of Public Instruction suggested that if people wanted to, they could utilize the prior year's enrollment and calculations in order to keep the dollar amount stable at what that amount was, rather than have that increase in cost. So this hearing is simply to see if anybody wanted to object or support that motion or that particular thing, and then the Board of Education would be able to approve or deny the waiver after the hearing.
Okay, thank you, Andy. First of all, we're going to ask if there's any questions on this from the board, and then we'll ask if any member of the public would like to speak. But first, let's start with the board, if any board members have any questions. Go ahead, Troy.
So, Andy, just to clarify, so that calculation or that formula is based on the number of students transported, so mainly because we had Oregon Online students, roughly 25% in that category, then the overall number dropped, which affected the formula.
That, as well as, we were actually encouraging people to drive their students last year in order to reduce the population on buses. So both of those things combined had the impact of lowering the denominator of the equation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Tim, go ahead.
Andy, can you just briefly give me an overview of what our costs were last year and how they were different? And I'm not talking about specific numbers, but I'm talking about our costs last year were more than they were previous years, about the same, or less than previous years?
As far as transportation?
Yes.
They were less.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. And the biggest change, however, just to go back to Troy's question, was simply the ridership.
Yep, the denominator of the
You
equation
bet.
was significantly less.
You bet. Understood. That's all I have. That's what I understood.
Heather or Anna, any questions? Okay, now we'll entertain, if any member of the public would like to speak regarding this recommendation and you have not signed in, please come up and sign the sheet, and then we will have you for public comment. Is there anyone that wishes to speak? Asking a second time, is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on this hearing item? Asking a third time, is there any member of the public that would like to speak? Okay, now we will move on. If there's no further questions from the board, the hearing is now adjourned. And now we'll move into, is there a motion from the board to approve the resolution to request a waiver from DPI for the calculation for parent transportation contract based on the 2020-2021 school year amounts?
I'd like to move approval of the recommendation that we move to the calculation as Andy described.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Katie, can you please call the roll?
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Okay, that concludes the hearing and the action. Now moving on to D, action items. Number 1, the 2021-2022 SRO agreement. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jonan and also ask Chief Pagenkoff if you'd like to come up to the microphone too, so you can give a presentation with Ms. Jonan if you need to, and the board can ask you questions after we'll let them go through the agreement, and then the board will have a chance to discuss and ask questions.
Okay, thank you. So we would be seeking tonight a motion to approve the SRO agreement for the 21-22 school year. Our current SRO agreement expires August 31st of 2021. And the material we will be discussing is all in your packet. So the first item you have in your packet is the SRO agreement that we are proposing. And just to let you know the process, and I'll ask the chief to jump in and add to the presentation, but in terms of our process, so the chief with the SRO does an excellent job of doing detailed data reports in terms of how the SRO spends his time. And so she does send those to me every month. It does have very specific gender and race data that is confidential because of it's often identifiable. Given the percentage of students of color that we have in our district. So we do closely monitor that to do a check on ourselves. And so we look at where he's spending his time because we really want the focus of the program to be on the education and the mentorship and less on the law enforcement part, except where necessary or as requested by us. And so we did those reports. As you can imagine, it was an unusual year with not having our older students in session until April. And so we took a look at that. We had a number of meetings with high school, middle school principals in particular, but all the head principals were invited to give their input into how the year was going and what we would like to see improved or changed or added to the SRO program. In addition, we took advantage of some time available to really have the SRO do extensive training, particularly with youth and regarding schools. And I will have Chief talk about that in a moment. And then we had a meeting of a committee that has been working on this for a few years. So I just want to thank Mr. LeBron and Dr. Lakuta and President Flanagan for their participation in that meeting to go over some of the information that you will see tonight, as well as had a meeting with the village and discussed the representatives from that committee as well. And so with all of that feedback, you will have our proposal for tonight. We feel that the agreement is working well overall, with the caveat that we haven't had a regular school year to really test our process. So I would say from my lens, we really look at this year as another pilot to see that our meet and consult process is working and to see what needs to be changed. But I would say I speak for the district, and the chief and I have talked about that we don't see significant changes to the language of the MOU, but we want to make sure that if we have a situation where the SRO is involved, that we make sure that we debrief that situation to make sure that our internal processes are working, as well as Dr. Bergstrom has allocated time in September at our administrative team meeting so that all the administrators can be on the same page in terms of how the process will work. Because our number one goal is for our students to feel safe and secure in our buildings, and for our SRO to be partner with us in terms of our education and mentorship and really prevention. So with that, I will talk about the agreement, but I want to turn it over to Chief if you want to highlight some specific parts about our process.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to speak more on the training side of it. But as we work through as we work through the year, I'm continually watching as I'm sending this information to Attorney Jonan. I'm also reviewing it myself, looking at is what our SRO is seeing, are we best suiting him for the training he's getting? So if we're seeing an increase in children dealing with a lot of trauma, then we, and you'll see it in the training list, we then beefed up his training in that area to make sure that if he was needed as that resource, the school district could lean on him or the youth. Outside of the SRO agreement, something that's changed within the last year is I've gotten more involved myself, and yeah, that's why you see me listed specifically in this agreement, and I appreciate Attorney Jonan recommending that. What I've been doing is also meeting with some of the youth groups that represent diversity in our area, and my goal with that is to take that information, to take those suggestions, and take a look at this MOU, take a look at the training we're providing, but then also just take a look at, in general, our interactions, whether it's the officers or our SRO, and seeing where we can change. And then my goal is to report these changes back to these youth groups so that they understand not only is their time appreciated in meeting with me, but it's valued, and it's changing things. What I've told these great students is that, if I can make it, I'm gonna be here 12 years as the chief. And what could this community look like after 12 years if we work together? And I actually see one of the students over here. So that I hope to continue to incorporate as we move forward as well. So while there's an MOU here in front of you, there's other things that are involved.
So with that, I can come back to the agreement, but really what drove our process this year is Appendix A, B, and C. And so part of the MOU in paragraph 3 requires that we participate in joint strategic planning to develop annual goals for the SRO program. And so this year, because we had the benefit of the Dane County Youth Survey, we took a look at that data specific to Oregon, particularly in the area of mental health. And then we also looked at the time that the SRO was spending, as well as other studies on safety and security from the FBI. And just with what we know that student services and our administrators were seeing with our kids. And one thing we really focused on this year was if the police department was seeing things in the community, even though kids weren't in school, to let us know that, as long as the parents were comfortable with that, and then we could reach out and provide support. So really trying to partner, since our kids were at home more, if there was a situation in the home, that we could still help support kids. And we really focused on that. So with that in mind, and also one of the things that we know about education is that relationships are the foundation. And so trying to really have the SRO build those positive relationships with students. And I did hear the comment about, the space and connections being a safe place. And I really take that to heart and just want to reassure that we would make sure that we had a very tight curriculum for those places where the SRO is participating. And certainly, would talk with the principals about that feedback, because the goal is to help him build a relationship with students, because we know when there's a positive relationship that kids are more likely to presume positive intent and prevention strategies are more effective, and that they will look at him truly as the resource where they can get assistance, and to be another trusted adult to talk to. So with that, we have our goals in our document. Main goal is always to help maintain a safe school environment, build trust, and provide mentorship. And you'll see the strategies there. We try to have measurable strategies so that we can judge the effectiveness of the program and see if it is meeting our primary goals of mentorship, education, and prevention. So you'll see the first two are the safety, and the second one is building the strong relationships. So just an increased presence. We hear feedback from the kids that they love to see him at recess and lunch. And so that's just really nice for us to hear. You'll see our third goal in looking at the Dane County Mental Health Survey, and what our kids are reporting to us, and what we're seeing is that we really want to focus on vaping, and focus on decreasing our numbers in that area. 4, that he would participate with us in our work on equity, because it is one of our 5 values and very important for that position in particular. And then 5, also look at him helping us with addressing bullying and harassment, and being another trusted adult with our anti-hate speech training. 6, we want to focus on him partnering with us in terms of addressing mental health. One thing that we did pilot last year is he participated in meetings with student services where appropriate at Forest Edge, and the feedback we received there is that was very helpful to provide support to families as part of those meetings. So we would like to increase his presence in other buildings as where appropriate. And then we also are looking at a new program called Speak Up, Speak Out, and I will let the chief talk about that.
Sure, and Andy, we worked through safety meetings on this project as well. Department of Justice kicked out a program called Speak Up, Speak Out, and essentially it's an anonymous phone line you can call, or tip line, and report information, and then that would work through, the SRO would work through with the school administration to, decide where we go from there.
And then our final goal is to look at a process so that we can solicit feedback from students, staff, and our families this year during the start of the second semester, to get feedback on the program and to see how the agreement and the processes are working when our kids are in a regular school year. And so we are going to meet with the village after the first semester to talk about the best way to get that feedback. So with the second appendix you have is Appendix B, and that gives you a sense of the SRO context that we had in the 2021 school year. But then we also included November 2019 to March of 2020. And we started this data collection in November of 2019, and so that's why we started with that date. And then Appendix C is the trainings that he has participated in. So with that, I will see what the chief would like to add.
Yes, so most of these, as you'll see, our highest numbers for SRO contacts are building relationships, informal counselor, educator, mentor, prevention action. As you go down, a citation issued, we wanted to give you an idea of what kind of citations are we talking about here. So to give you an idea, disorderly conduct, drug related, underage drinking related. The in custody, what that refers to is physically arresting a student and taking them from the school. As you can see in both pie charts, 0. With referrals to DA's office, what that is whether it's the SRO or an officer, a patrol officer, they investigate a case, and what they do is they take the case and they just present it to the DA's office. They don't make an immediate arrest because one isn't warranted. And to give you an idea, referrals to the DA was sometimes we hear a terroristic threat, but it could be, when that occurs, it could also mean like a student making a threat over social media. We will refer those to the DA if we don't feel that it's an immediate threat. Last year we had released in our annual report some pie charts, and what I've told many that I've talked to about our annual report is this was just our first step in data release. Because data can always be perceived certain ways, and we certainly want to be very clear with the data we're releasing. So thanks to working with Attorney Jonan and also the great work of our support services supervisor, Rudy, we broke it down even further. Before, we just gave you police action, and that could be perceived as, well, wow, this is all police arrests, or wow, this is all citations issued. But in reality, we broke it down much further. So now you can see where truancy, the SRO really doesn't have a decision in the matter. That's a request from the school district, and we just facilitate right in the citation. Citations issued, as you see, they're listed there, the types of citations, the referrals, the in custodies. And school consequences is when the SRO, may be involved or may be told of something, but the school chooses to take care of it. And then police assistance. So this is where it kind of skewed those numbers of police contacts. We have a lot of police assistance calls because when people need help, they call police, whether they're adults or youth. And in those situations, those would be your accidental 911 calls, the phones we have nowadays, easy pocket dials, or it could be a real 911 call, check welfares. We have a lot of check welfares. It could be a student that nobody's heard from in a while. Then we go check on them. Or a mental health crisis, accident, medical issue, accident in a parking lot, and even a crime where just simply a suspect isn't identified. So it could be a theft case and we just don't know who stole the item, so it's just a police assistance case at that point. For the training, I've talked with other police chiefs in the Dane County area, and I will say we are aggressive with training for the SRO as well as our officers, and our village board is soon going to see what our officers are doing for training as well. I want nothing more to improve this SRO program. I've already had a few chiefs in Dane County calling asking about our MOU. They want to take a look at it. They want to take a look at the things we're doing. So we're going to keep being aggressive with the training. So you'll see there's just this different array of things. It's, you have the NASRO training, which is the National Association of School Resource Officers training. That's kind of your main gamut of everything. That's what every SRO is typically seeing, and they ball it up into one conference and they feed it right to these SROs. And then all of the SROs get a chance to network too. So if an SRO is seeing something unique in Stoughton, they can very easily communicate it to Oregon, and then our Oregon SRO can communicate it to faculty. Critical consciousness, digital threat assessment. There's just so many different things that not only a police officer deals with, but then you add on the uniqueness of an SRO. Some of this training we've been connected to because of the school district, because of Candace, because of Attorney Jonan and other faculty, which we greatly appreciate. Because then when I hear about it, I look on the police side and try to find similar training as well. But other parts of this is Department of Justice that's pushing out training, or it's also just group organizations that are trying to pull in these SROs and educate them. So, are there any questions on the training listed?
Well, I think one thing I would just add, so if you look at the agreement, the changes we're recommending are highlighted in yellow. There aren't substantive changes. We are asking for a change in the process to review that we'd like to review with the village after the first semester, so we can make any changes for second semester in terms of process, and then we would review again after school is out to see what changes we need. And one question that we frequently have and someone spoke to it tonight, and this was a result of the feedback we received at the last, where we had the public come in and give comments on the agreement, is that we really try to minimize when kids are questioned by the SRO at school. And so our agreement is if it relates to outside of school at all, that is done, and it's not an emergency, that is done through the parents. So for example, if someone calls, there's a car speeding down Fish Hatchery in Fitchburg, outside of school, gives a license plate, that we would work with the SRO, and that questioning would take place outside of school with where the parents agree upon. That has nothing to do with school. If it is a potential crime at school, then before the SRO questions the student, then we do make every effort to call parents and have them come in for the questioning, unless it would be an emergency. So let's say there's graffiti in the bathroom that could potentially be criminal. We would call home versus if someone is reported to have a handgun on their person, right? Like that's something we need to address right away. So we try, as in every circumstances except an emergency, to give parents that opportunity.
And when we did that tabletop and heard all those concerns, I remember that very well. And actually what I do is I have Officer Crocco fill out on a regular basis a spreadsheet where he has to indicate anytime he interviews a student, and if he did he, yes or no, contact a parent prior to interviewing, and if he said no, then he has to document when. Not only does his direct supervisor review that on a regular basis, but then I also review it before I send it to Attorney Jonan as well. So it's watched well.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do is go around the table and see who has questions or has anything that they'd like to discuss regarding this agreement. So I'm going to start with you, Tim.
I've been fortunate to be involved in the process over the last 2+ years, and it has come a long way from when we started this. We started this committee working with the department and the chief, more out of a little bit, from my perspective, a little bit of a crisis than as a cooperative effort. And it has come a long way since then. I think we have an extremely productive relationship with the department and with the chief and with our SRO officer. I think, again, it has come a long, long way. I also want to recognize the chief, not only for that cooperation and thoughtfulness, but carrying that message to the village. Because there too, we felt a little bit at distance, and I think you have done an awesome job bridging that gap through this SRO process to have us all working more closely together. So we're at a point where we have a very good agreement here, but it can always be better. There are little tweaks this year because we didn't have a lot of experience this past year, just not having kids in school. And so I would expect that will continue to evolve bit by bit, but I don't see a huge gap here anywhere. So again, I think this is a great agreement to work with this year. So thank you.
Anna.
So I remember when we were revamping this whole document, and it feels like it was forever ago. So it's shocking to me that it really has only been about a year that we kind of came to this revised agreement. A couple of my comments really, I don't have too many questions, but a couple of comments. I appreciate that we've added in here a semi-annual assessment mid-year for us to, again, check in, see how things are going, evaluate what we've got in front of us and how this is working. So I think that's a really great change, and I appreciate that update. I also really appreciate seeing, written in really clear, in a really clear form, the goals of this SRO and what their role in the schools is going to be. I think that's so important to have a defined understanding of what that role is and having it very clear as to what we want from that position within our schools and the value that can be gained from that. So I really appreciate that. I also really find the breakdown of the data helpful on the types of interactions that are happening with that SRO officer and our students or our teachers and our staff. That's really good information and will be good to monitor that, to, again, continue to reinforce what role is this SRO playing in the school, where is their time being spent most of the time. Lastly, I just did a quick calculation of the number of hours of training. I mean, we're talking 5 pages worth of training, which equals 363 hours of training over the 2020-21 year. It goes into this year, correct? Are some happening yet in this calendar year? Or are these ones that have all been completed through this point in time? Do we know?
So the last 2 for sure, he has not completed, but they're on the books.
Okay. I mean, that's really impressive. And when you look at the types of classes that are being included here, it's really very much focused on our district's value of equity and the role of law enforcement within a school setting. And so I really appreciate all of that training. I think that is going to serve our SRO member, but most importantly, the students in our school really well for having this individual. I guess I have one question that relates to some of the comments we heard this evening on some students feeling less safe by having an SRO officer in our schools. If we have data that we know those situations in hand, is there a mechanism to help build those relationships to take away some of that fear and some of those feelings? Because I think that would really be valuable because we want, like, our main goal is to have everyone in our schools feel safe. And if having the presence of an SRO officer is creating unsafe feelings, I'm not comfortable with that. And so I'd like to understand how we can address that. Are there any suggestions or ways for us to manage that?
To me, it's a really tough one to tackle. But my first step in trying to tackle that is meeting with some of these youth groups and trying to help me understand their world and how I can help fix it. I look at this as I hope that this program someday is the type of program that it serves everybody equally. That's the goal, just like policing as a whole. And that's why I think, I totally agree, this SRO MOU is gonna continue to improve, and it should. That's how it should be. That's what these kids deserve. But that is my first step, is meeting with the youth groups and just trying to get an understanding. And I've already gotten some really great feedback on things we can do. And actually, tomorrow I'm going to put a little bit of that into movement, but it's just going to take time, too.
And I have one other question that I tried to find in the agreement, and I don't see it, but I know there's comments about that the SRO officer should wear a polo shirt when possible, really, I think, taking away looking threatening, looking like the role of a law enforcement individual in the school. Is the officer armed?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That really covers my questions and comments at this time.
Well, and one, just, on a one point of reference, and I did email Amy Miller just to make sure I had it correct. And the Dane County Youth Survey, there is a question that's not directly about the SRO, but it says, please indicate how important or not important the changes below are in promoting racial equality at school. So it's not directly about safety, but that is a component. And so one of the things they surveyed is stop having police in the schools. And so 20% of students said that was important, 42% said not important, and 27% said don't know or not sure. So at least that is a data point that we have to start from. Sure. So they said, please indicate how important or not important the changes below are in promoting racial equality at your school. And so, there are other things they had to rank, but one of the options was stop having police in the schools. And 20% said it was important. 42% said it was not important. And then, 37% said they didn't know or weren't sure. So, so we have a data point to start with on that in addition to those conversations.
Thank you.
Is that it, Anna? Okay, Kevin, you're next.
Yes, I'll be brief. You know, this topic has gotten a lot of attention, obviously, in the community, and, you know, from being a little bit of an outsider, being a new board member, a ton of progress has been made for sure, and the thing that I like to hear the most is just the continuous improvement aspect of everything you've done, the training, that we have open minds about, you know, what an SRO should be about and what they shouldn't be about, and then getting feedback from the opinion that matters the most, that's the kids, across the spectrum of, you know, when you think of from an equity perspective, that it's all about this relationship that this SRO is creating with the kids and how this person's perceived. So the person obviously that's chosen is super critical, and the training they're getting is super critical. But you know, no question. But the comment really is about the continuous improvement mindset. And I firmly believe that someday, you know, you're already getting calls from other communities that will continue, and that will be a beacon for how it should be done. So good luck on that journey.
Heather.
I too am a fairly new board member, and so this is new for me, so I can definitely appreciate the work that's happened so far. I'm a fan of reviewing it twice a year. I think this is a great conversation for us to have as a board midway through, and then again at the end of the school year. A couple comments. Anna touched on one of mine on the kind of who, you know, people not feeling safe. I really would like to better understand that, and I know you're working on that already, but that would be really important for me to have more data and more talking points on. I also am really impressed with the training. It's a long list, and that's great. A couple of comments on that. Is this something that happens every year or every other year? Is this repeated, or is there a next level of training, or is it once you've done it, you kind of check the box and move along?
It's continual, and what we do is when we have these check-ins with Attorney Jonan, we're looking at, all right, it's been a while since the SROs had this sort of training. We're seeing an uptick, though. Let's find something. Okay. But we try not to keep going back to the same training because we want to continue to expand his tools.
Sure, understandable. Somebody had a comment in the public section, and I didn't see it in the long list because it's so long. Good problem to have. About the non-punitive or restorative justice, that kind of theme of how to handle something with it when appropriate in a non-punitive way. Is there any sort of training that covers that or that is on the docket?
So a lot of that's covered in the NASRO conference because that's what they're trying to do. You know, our goal when I took over this program was this is our youth. If there's any time to get them on a different path, it's now. And with the SRO supporting the school, maybe we have that better chance. So that is happening already. As soon as the MOU changed and the relationship got a lot stronger, things slowed down. Wasn't this SRO comes in, issues a ticket, or finds a consequence for the student. It's, you know, let's just talk about this. Let's figure out what's the underlying issues here, and let's get to the bottom of it. There's been times where the SRO with an administrator meets with the parents and the student to kind of talk through things and try to get, again, the student on a different path. So that a lot of that is happening. We try to handle that partnering with the school district, because if you start going into referrals with the DA's office and things like that, right, they're no longer just in Oregon. They're just not our community member. They're one of many in the Dane County system. So we try to do what we can.
Okay. My other question is based on the SRO having a gun, and I just, again, playing the newish board member, I'd like to better understand the reasoning behind that.
So for us, it's because they're a police officer, first and foremost. If there were to be a threat in the school, our officers getting there, if they're on the road, the delay is going to be there. And I did talk with one of these youth groups about the feelings behind that. You know, seeing an officer, SRO, they're in plain clothes, but seeing them with a gun on them. And I said, I don't feel comfortable changing that as a police chief. I want my officer to be prepared to stop a threat, because I can't live with myself if our kids got hurt in a school. And I talked to them and I said, well, how could we do something different? Could we do something different? One of the ideas was, maybe just a very short video to all students before they start school, saying, hey, this is Officer Caraco. This is our school resource officer. This is exactly what he looks like. He talks for a little bit. He shares some details about himself professionally and personally. And, and he can explain that, this is how I look, and I do have a firearm on me, but it's only to protect people.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Yep, my last thing is just I'm also in favor of continuous improvement, especially as it relates to the mental health piece and other pieces that are coming in. And obviously you all have taken great focus on that area, but just the more that we can dovetail with what we're doing as a school district with SEL and mental health and equity and inclusion, the better. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to having a bigger and broader discussion at the halfway mark when we're in a more normal school year.
Thanks, Heather. Troy.
Excuse me. So thanks for coming tonight, Chief Pagankoff. It's really great to have you come to us and speak to us about the agreement. And I would echo a lot of Tim's sentiments that we've come a long way from where we were a few years ago. And I just want to recognize, your statement that you want nothing more than to improve this program. And so I think we're all on the same page, and that's it's really great to be here. I had the same question as Anna and some of the others about what are we doing to address students and their feeling of safety in the school. And I really liked what you had to say about meeting with the youth groups and then reporting back to them. And I think that says a lot about your genuine interest in improving this program. One suggestion that I would have, I guess, on that note is to maybe look for some ways to reach out to some of those underrepresented students who are not actively participating in those youth groups. I don't have the answer there, but just recognizing that not all of our underrepresented students are active in those groups. One question is, looking at the data, in the 1920 school year, we had 18 SRO contacts with students that were related to mental health. And I think that was related to a safety concern with mental health. So my question is how is that contact initiated versus, I guess, an SRO contact versus maybe a school administrator making that contact? And I don't know if Chief Pagankoff can answer that or Ms. Jonan.
So I think there's a couple things that happen. I mean, it's all kinds of different scenarios that come out. In some situations, it could be a student that asks the SRO for help and is suffering from some sort of mental health crisis. I think another situation that occurs is that it's something completely different, like a disturbance or some sort of drug abuse, drug addiction, or something like that. But when you start pulling back the layers of what's going on, you come to the conclusion that it's a mental health crisis. It's not, they may be abusing drugs to self-medicate. There's just a lot of layers there. And then thirdly, there are situations where the school staff needs the SRO's assistance in supporting that student.
Okay, so in some cases it's maybe student initiated, in other cases it's school administrator initiated. Mm-hmm. Fair to say? Okay.
I think that's fair, and yeah.
We have rare situations where, all staff have the ability to call 911 if they feel that their safety is threatened, right? And so if that happens, then we try to have the SRO respond because we want someone that might be familiar with the student and the situation. So it may be something like that too, where people reach out for help or that we need. I mean, he is trained in nonviolent crisis intervention. So if we have a student that is escalating, he is a partner with us to help that student be in a better place.
And I would add, it's not uncommon for us at the police department to have interactions with that student at home. and that student's suffering from that same sort of mental health crisis at school. So it's good to have that information there as well.
Thank you for that. And then my last question, I guess, is kind of following up on Heather's comment about the significant training that we had in this past cycle. Anna mentioned it as well. And I guess my question is, was that a COVID anomaly that we had less time with students and so we were able to put more time into training? And I know we had really reset this program a couple of years ago. Or do we expect that we'll have that same significant level of training over the next cycles?
So I would say the anomaly is more that more training was offered during that time, especially virtually. So it is a lot easier for me to send staff to virtual training, and even in our SRO capacity. So that, I think, was more of an opportunity to take advantage of. I do still plan, though, on remaining aggressive in training for the school resource officer. And I do think we've just, as a society, transitioned to a lot of things virtually. So I do think, it's kind of opened up law enforcement's world for those opportunities.
Great, thank you, and that's all I had.
Just a couple comments. Safety is a really complex word, right? When you think about safety of the school or student personal safety or how they feel about, what they're doing in school based on who they are. And we balance safety of the school district with students and making sure that they get an education. So this is a really difficult space. But as Tim said, he and I have been involved in this for 3 years. And 3 years ago, we didn't have an agreement that made sure that parents were engaged before a student was interviewed. We didn't have an SRO who was doing this kind of training. We didn't have goals. And so we've come a long way, and there's a light being shined on this program, and I give you a lot of credit because both you and Gina are really open to that light and to discussion. And we have people that maybe don't disagree that we're there yet, but we're certainly on a better path that we were 3 years ago, and I think that deserves a lot of credit, and we're open to suggestions. So a couple things that I would talk about is I give you a lot of credit for meeting with students. I think we have to meet with parents and families too, and I know you guys have plans to do that, and it's more than just a one-way survey. It's an interactive session because parents, as we've learned, students may know things and are doing things, but parents aren't always brought along, or parents have a different view of the world sometimes than their kids. So I think it's really important that those can happen together, but then parents can be, we can engage parents in a different way too. I think that's really important. Just in terms of the goals and the rationale and objectives, we're not there yet. This is a benchmark year. The reason we wanted to do this is get some things down on paper so we could start on this path of having real goals, objectives, and measures of success for this program, because we have big dreams for this program. We want to be a leader in this. So, that's where we're headed. But I think it's really important that everybody understands where we've come from, that we're not there yet, but we're certainly on the road, and we have partners that are willing to go there with us. So thank you for your investment in your SRO and training. We didn't have that. We did not have a true partner 3 years ago, and you are a big part of that. So thank you. With that, if anybody doesn't have any other questions, I'll go ahead, Heather.
Krista, you brought up a lot of great points. Thank you for that. I have a question. Help me understand who has all reviewed this in terms of, from a committee perspective, have any of our external partners that we work with in equity and inclusion, help me understand kind of who has eyes on this and has said, yep, this passes kind of the test.
Gina, do you want to take that?
Sure. So in terms of internally, we've had monthly meetings with our head principals, as well as working group with Mr. LeBrun, Dr. Lakuta, and then members from the village. So Randy Glitch is the chair of that. And remind me who else was at our meeting. So Randy was there, and I know they had one person who was absent. Prior to that, Jenna Jacobson was the chair of that process. So as well as the prior city administrator and now new city administrator.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yep. I guess I would just offer maybe that going forward as we continue to improve, that we could have additional eyes on this outside of the subset of people who are doing amazing work, but it would just be good to get that other lens on there as well.
Yeah, and I'll answer to that in terms of that's one of the reasons we made sure that's in the goals and objectives, that it is part of the agreement now that we will get feedback, and all these meetings are open meetings, so they're open to the public, and so people are able to come, do public comment, and engage in those meetings as well, and they're welcome. But yes, that's one of the reasons we absolutely put that in the agreement, is that it's mandated that we do have feedback. So thanks. Go ahead, Anna.
So I just want to expand a little bit, because when Krista was saying that this is like a new agreement that we've had, that went through public meetings with community stakeholders. And so we held open houses and held meetings. And so that, to get to this document, did go through at least a community involvement input to get us to this point at least. So that happened, I think, in 2019, right?
Go ahead, Gina.
Yes, and I did want to echo that when Chief and I talk monthly, that those aren't open meetings just because we're talking about specific student data, but when we meet with board members or with the village, that those are all publicly noticed meetings.
Yes, but for this iteration of this latest, we did have public forums with the village and the school district. We had lots and lots of public meetings about that, so to get to this place. But that's why we also developed these goals and objectives as part of that agreement. So
That's good for me to know and
Yeah.
for the public to
yeah,
know.
absolutely. Thank you. Any other further questions or discussion?
Krista, if I could just add one quick
Sure.
thing. I think we've really brought this program along really well, and I appreciate all of your positive comments about the program. All of the stakeholders that have been involved in the work Attorney Jonah and I have done, it's all putting it on paper and it's all pulling that data. But I really think it's noteworthy to point out the hard work that all of the principals, the associate principals, and Alex, our SRO, have done, because they've taken all these words and they've made them work and made it start to improve, and they're committed to continuing to improve it. And so I can't thank all of the school staff and Alex for their hard work and working towards this. So.
And there is also a safety component of that, and I don't know, Andy, if you want to talk about the actual safety component in terms of school safety or safety drills and the SRO's involvement in that.
Absolutely. We do drills twice a year, and Alex and the department and the fire department actually are all part of that as kind of a cohesive community team. So definitely appreciate the partnership that we've been going on. And Chief and Rudy come to those meetings all the time, and it is definitely a partnership that's been helpful.
Great, thank you. And it's worthy of our time. I'm glad we spend a lot of time on that, and that's why we postponed it from last meeting, because we need to have a robust discussion about it, and that will continue. And that's also part of this mandated agreement. So without any further discussion, I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to move approval of the 2021-2022 SRO agreement as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Katie, can you call the roll?
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak? Yes. Ms. Garrison? Yes. Mr. Maring?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Next step for this is it will go to the village board, because this is a joint agreement between the Oregon School District and the Village of Oregon. So it is pending approval from that body as well before it is signed by us and by them. Thank you, Chief Pagankoff. Okay, moving on to action item 2, policy 611, financial, and then policy 751 is transportation. And these are the continued busy work of the policy committee. So I will turn it over to Anna.
Stuck on my, there we go. Yes, so policy met earlier here in August, and we took up some really fairly straightforward changes on the policy 611 financial. Honestly, it was just kind of a cleanup item. For example, we reference the Financial Assets Committee, which is no longer a standing committee of our board. And so that was revised really to suggest that the assigned fund balances would be assigned by the business manager in consultation with the district superintendent, the board president, and the board treasurer. I would note that this evening we have on our agenda an action item to approve the assigned fund balance. So it will also be an action item in front of the board going forward. Or, I mean, I think that's a standing process for our board. So that modification was made. And then another cleanup item really in section 611.04. We're just giving the business manager a little more time to calculate the percentage of unassigned general fund balance to report to the board. And so that will be in December as opposed to September of each year. Those were, and Andy,
I was going to say, Andy, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I can calculate a little faster than December, but really the idea was to time it with when the audit was presented. And unfortunately, we don't have the audit usually until our hands until late November, December. So rather than having 2 agenda items, we thought it would just be nice to have one. So thank you.
Okay, so since it's coming from the policy committee, Anna, it does not require a second, but it does require you making the motion for the recommendation from the policy committee.
Yeah, so I would move approval of policy 611 as presented in your packet.
Okay, is there any discussion? I'll open up the floor. Troy?
Just one question for Andy. The new fund that we have for the capital projects, the long-term capital improvement trust, what number is that? Is that in the 40s?
Yes, it is in the 40s. The exact number off the top of my head, I don't have.
That's good enough. I just wanted to make sure that it was still in the 40s and covered.
Any other questions or discussion items on that? Okay, Katie, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Mr. Maring?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz? Yes. Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carried. Motion carries 6-0. Moving to the next item is policy 751, transportation. Anna and Andy again.
Yes, so policy 751 also came to the policy committee earlier in August. And with this one, I think I might pass it over to Andy to give an explanation. It's also relatively straightforward and more like cleanup, but I'm going to let him go through those changes.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely a lot of cleanup type things. As you can see in 7510203, we're kind of changing some titles of folks. Dr. Weidensee's title has changed to Director of Pupil Services, that type of thing. And just cleaning up some wording and kind of the vocabulary of how things are stated now. Probably the biggest changes are actually kind of later in the policy in 75103. We talk about in the past, we had some dates that were in there. We just wanted an extra week, basically, to get from July 31st to August 30th for people to be able to give us information regarding daycare providers. And then the other component was rather than listing all the different daycares that we work with, we kind of took a step back and said, well, would we work with everybody that had a certain number of students that were participating in their facility, and we said yes. So why not put that in there rather than having to update it all the time with different addresses and locations and names, because sometimes those names do change, and we don't get back to the policy as often as we perhaps should. 7510305, we do have a situation occasionally where we are working with students out of their attendance area. And so typically what's done in the past is working with the superintendent to make sure that that's okay. And talking with Dr. Bergstrom, she thought that would be a good thing to change in policy just to allow that. This is a little bit more important these days because in the past our boundaries were a little bit more flexible, but now we have kind of more hardened boundaries. So it's important to have a process related to that. Again, just a process thing about online requesting rather than a transportation of form. We wanted our parents to go ahead and do an electronic copy in 7510306, and then emailing that to the transportation director helps kind of facilitate timing and everything. And then the last components, again, online 75104, sorry. Updating our school locations. This is how we measure the distance from school to people's homes. And so we needed to add Forest Edge. And for whatever reason, we were probably because we didn't have a curb, quite honestly, at Brooklyn, but now we do. We added that. And then we did look at our whole transportation system and found that we had a couple places that we were providing kind of some convenience location dropping in the afternoon. And rather than naming those or something, we just figured these stops seem to be the 2 stops that we do for different facilities around those locations. And so we just added those to policy too. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Do any board members have any questions? Vinny? Go ahead, Tim.
And again, Andy, that last section there, those convenience, the couple of convenience spots, those are on the way. They're not out of the way and points of destination.
Correct. Where the idea is not to incur additional costs for those things. The idea is if there's something that we're kind of passing by anyhow, let's try to facilitate convenience for parents and students.
Any other questions? Okay, again, this is a recommendation from policy, so Anna, I'll ask you to make that.
Yeah, so our policy did recommend approval of the 751 transportation, as you see in front of you. So I would make a motion for our board to approve policy 751 transportation as it is presented to you this evening.
Okay, is there any additional discussion? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bija?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Mr. Marion?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Moving on to item 4, approval of 2020-2021 assigned funds in use in the 2021-2022 budget.
Love
Andy.
those numbers, yes.
Wow.
If we could go to the next slide, I'll maybe talk from that a little bit. So just kind of because you guys all want an accounting lesson at 8 o'clock at night on a Monday. So just a quick thing, fund balance is also known in the accounting world as equity, and equity is basically assets minus liabilities. So a lot of times people talk about it as kind of our cash balance, and quite honestly, the majority of it is, but there are other things going on there. So, and we'll actually talk about them within the components of equity or fund balance. And we just approved policy 611. Within 611, we talk about the 5 different types of fund balances that are in there. And I'll just go through those real quickly. Non-spendable is simply like inventory or prepaid items. In our situation, probably the biggest item in there was always our Panther construction land. We still do have one lot. It's kind of a segue, but that's still sitting in there. We're not going to work with it this year, but probably next year where we'll build on that. Restricted is restricted by external parties, so it might be a legislative type of thing or a statute where we can't spend it, or in our case, a major part of what's in restricted is actually our self-funded dental insurance. We run our own self-funded health insurance or dental insurance plan, and that actually is the majority of the increase this year, which was about $31,200. I should have mentioned that in the non-spendable, negative $350,000. So our actual non-spendable fund balance went down last year, and that's because we actually sold last year's house, even though we completed it in the 1920 school year. It didn't sell until 2021, and so that's the reduction in the fund balance related to that house. So we kind of look at the school construction house as inventory until we recognize the sale. Sorry about that, jumping around a little bit. Restricted, again, most of that is related to our self-insurance plan. And our self-insurance plan, even though we increased our deductible, or I'm sorry, our maximum benefit last year from $1,000 to $2,000 to recognize that a lot of our staff weren't able to access dental insurance or dental services the prior year because of the pandemic, we still saw an increase in fund balance. We did move that benefit back to $1,000 starting on July 1st. Committed, I think Ms. Jonan wanted to talk about that.
Sorry, no, it's actually 2,000. Currently, we increased it to 3,000, and now we're back to 2,000.
I apologize.
We're proud of that because that is a nice offering we give our staff. So.
Yep. I apologize for getting that wrong. So the next thing is called committed, and that is actually totally at the discretion of the board. There is a process in policy 611 that allows you to put something into committed. It does talk about a 2/3 vote to do that. Currently, we have nothing in committed. Everything is in the other 4 categories. Assigned is what we're talking about today, and our recommendation is to put a large amount of money into that. We'll talk about that in the next slide. But that is increasing, or recommended to increase, by $1,071,000 for this next year. And then unassigned is kind of everything that's left to some degree, but it serves a very important purpose. And that important purpose is that basically those funds help us cash flow throughout the year. School district's funding does not happen kind of evenly. We're becoming more and more dependent on property taxes as opposed to state equalization aid. And as that happens, that means we don't really get our cash flow until the second half of the year. Typically, people are paying in December. By the time the municipalities pay us, it's mid to late January. So a lot of our money kind of doesn't even come to us until then. So we have to have some money in the bank to cash flow until that period of time. So we do see an increase of $257,051 in our unassigned fund balance. The majority of that, about $243,000, sorry to throw all these numbers at you, is completely related to the sale of the school site that we had on the west side. So if the board had a desire to designate that or assign that to a purpose, it's available. I'm just wanting to kind of share that's where it is at this point in time. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier that our planned assigned fund balance is fairly significant. Thought I'd go through each component, and then if people had questions related to it, we could talk about those. Our building budgets, basically, if a particular school does not utilize all their funds, about 16 years now, we've allowed them to carry the funds over. We have actively worked on reducing that over years, and it is starting to come down a little bit. But during the pandemic, the schools were not able to spend as much because there weren't as many activities as going on as normal. But we did basically take and not let those fund balances increase, or those carryover amounts increase. We kind of locked them in at the 1920 carryover amounts. That's the same with departmental budgets. We kind of pretty much locked those in at the prior year's levels, so that because of the pandemic, that people weren't benefiting from that. That's one of the reasons why we later on, I'll mention this in a second, why that in the last year we had a $1.5 million increase, and I'm jumping around, apologize, but we're going to $2.5 million. So that those extra funds might have gone to some of the building budgets and departmental budgets, but we're actually suggesting to increase the unallocated amount for issues related to COVID, as well as the school budget situation, which I'll talk about briefly in a second. Act 59 is a vocational grant. Unfortunately, Mr. Granberg doesn't know how much he gets quite early in the process, so he is kind of told later in the school year how much he's getting. This is related to schools doing, I hope I get this right, dual credit type situations. The legislature wanted to encourage that behavior. As a way to do that, they provide a grant to the school for every student that does that. That has also, not only is he kind of told late, but he hasn't been able to find things to use those funds for, especially during the pandemic, so it's kind of accrued a little bit. He does have some plans for that, and there are different components of the vocational area that have components of that $135,000. A significant amount is, for instance, related to daycare. That's probably in the child care services, I guess. And eventually, we may be presenting you some ideas that we've been working on related to that, and that's why they're creating some balance there. Teacher compensation. This is related to the referendum that we had back in 2016, I think, related to increasing teacher compensation. As we implemented that, some of the funds didn't get spent as fast as we had them available, so they accrued into the fund balance, and they're still there. These are the funds that we've been talking about utilizing the staff members that are off schedule, and how we pay for their increases if they get one. Long-term capital improvement trust. These are the funds that were left over from from the maintenance department this last year. What I'm suggesting here is to utilize those funds that were left over to deposit into that fund that we established last summer. It only has a few dollars in it. It was basically a way to start the clock so that we could use those funds. The fund had to be established for 5 years before you can use the dollars. So the idea is if we deposited that $146,000 in there, in about 3 years, we'd actually be able to use it. Hopefully, we'd be able to put additional dollars in there. This works for two purposes. One is we are now what's called a negative tertiary district. So if we do large expenditures in one particular year that can have an impact on our aid, we're just marginally in that situation. So it's not hugely impactful, but it does have an impact. The other probably more important rule or reason for it is this year is it's kind of like a sinking fund for us. So it's an account where we can put the monies away, and as we do have large capital expenditures, and we do have some roofing things that are a couple years out that are kind of heading our way, this is be a way to be able to fund those without having to go borrow money or something of that nature, or bridge it between 2 or 3 different fiscal years. And then we get to the 2.5 million. And we've allocated some of those funds in meetings prior to this evening. For instance, we talked about $450,000 for the shell space, which we are unfortunately still waiting for state approval on. They have a backlog. We anticipate our date for them to look at it is in September. We didn't push that any further though, because the other component of it was the steel frames for the doors and windows aren't coming until September either. So unfortunately, we were the victim of some supply issues as well. So both those things should happen in September. We have all the trades kind of lined up, hoping that we'll be able to provide that space to our students in October if everything goes well. So that's part of that $2.5 million there. The other component is we talked about the social workers, the 2 social workers for 2 years that would be allocated to those funds as well. And I guess the other idea that we are starting to just think about, and we don't have a plan completely nailed down yet, but other things that fit our priorities that we've talked about in the future. And the main component here is that without the state allocating additional funds to us for the next 2 years, we're trying to figure out how we meet the needs that we have. So we would come back and talk about what those funds would be, but we'd like to just put them in that category of assigned fund balance at this point in time. And if you add those things up, that comes up to the $4,028,000. So I know that was a lot, apologize, but if you have questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Tim, you want to start? Go ahead. Sure.
So that $2.5 million, obviously it's an eye catcher.
Yeah.
And we've talked about $450,000 of capital improvements. Yep. The social workers are operating, although we're identifying 2 years, which makes them quasi, not capital, but quasi project specific.
Yeah, what we talked about, if you recall, is we do have some debt service payments that are included within our revenue limit. It's called non-referendum debt, and it was related to refinancing of our pension plan. That's going to end in 23, 24.
Right, I did read about that.
Yep, and so the idea is, yes, we're going to use those funds, those social worker funds, and then bridge to that revenue source, which will come available at that time. The reason we're not using, for instance, ESSER funds for the social workers is because if we don't use ESSER funds, then we will get categorical reimbursement for those positions, which is about 28.5% money back in the money we spend the following year. So the idea is we're kind of trying to, rather than charging ESSER, we went to get that categorical reimbursement. In this situation, we would. So we're utilizing those funds to do that.
So then there's like 1.7 or 1.8 million dollars of unaccounted for.
We have some ideas.
It would be nice to have this to spend.
Yes.
So that's got my attention. And we put it in this bucket. What visibility do we have of that before it gets spent?
Our intention is to come back to you with a plan,
Okay,
but we just kind of ran out of time, to be honest.
okay.
Be upfront
And is that
with it.
about right? 1.7, 1.8-ish?
Yeah, something in there. I would say the social workers will cost about, closer to probably with benefits, depending on who they are. It could be for 2 years, closer to
Oh, that's right. It's 2
$350,000 to
years.
$400,000.
That's right.
Yes.
2 years.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So maybe a little bit less than the 1.7.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure that we don't put it in a bucket and then lose visibility as to how it's getting spent.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The other thing I would share with you is, last year we came to you with a number of $1.5 million. And basically, if we go back a slide, I'm sorry. I didn't talk about that first line, which is underlined. It says total increase. Our fund balance didn't decrease by anything last year. So even though we told you we were going to spend the fund balance, that 1.5 million on things, we ended up not spending it. And then actually the fund balance increased partially because of buildings not spending all their budgets and those types of things. Mr. LeBarn, you asked us before, transportation was less. Yes, it was less. Food service, we didn't use as much money as we thought with food service. Quite honestly, a lot of things fiscally happened until we got to the state budget in our favor last year, which would have been impossible to predict at the time. So we had a very good financial year. Had some feelings about that kind of in the middle of the year. Talked to our treasurer at that point in time. Said, hey, things are going really well for us. Unfortunately, the state budget is a difficult challenge that we're going to have, and so that's why we want to come back to you with some ideas in a future meeting.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear about that too, that that will come back to the board, and it's been made more difficult because the state funding picture has thrown everything into a loop, because that is money that we have to spend one time. And then we got to figure out how to fund our budget after that. And so that's why it's gotten pretty tricky and pretty difficult. So I want to make sure people understand that.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I'll take it a little bit further, hopefully. I'm not trying to be political here, but there is money there. It's not that the state's in a bad financial position. They just have not been willing to fund schools because they say we have all this one-time money. So that's their rationale. The money is actually in the budget. It's in there. It's on the revenue side. They just haven't allocated it, and it's over $500 million. So the governor did ask the legislature to come back into session to talk about that, and my understanding is they gavelled out.
And to be fair, though, we do have more money than we had anticipated at the beginning of all this. So both of those things are happening. I mean, that's the other side of the coin.
And totally true. The issue is that it's one-time money, and the state budget money is continuing. It would have been or would be continuing. And so that's the hard push, is we're creating a huge fiscal cliff for us. Even if we get through the next 2 years, that third year out, there's a problem.
All right, any other questions or discussion?
Yep.
Troy, go ahead.
I just have a quick one on the 260,000. I mean, in my head, I like, based on everything you just said, the uncertainty, the state budget, I seem to like that being an unassigned, but talk me through the advantage, if there is one, of putting that into the long-term capital projects trust. Is there any benefit in that? And I guess as a second part of that question, I know that we can't use that fund until it's been in place for 5 years, but remind me, does every dollar that we use need to sit in that fund for 5 years, or just that first year?
We triple check that. It's kind of a goofy thing. When you establish it, when you put that first dollar in there, even if it's just $1, it starts the clock on all the money you put in there.
Okay.
So we will have full access to, in this case, we were suggesting 147,000, I think.
Okay. So
basically to get the clock started.
46,000.
We got the clock started last year with like
$50. Yep. And we actually got it started the prior year, even though it was July. They allowed us to claim that it would have been in 1920. That was just an anomaly of their process, those DPIs.
So based on what we're going to learn over this year and the state budget and things, we could then take that 260,000, for example, and move it into that fund next year, and there would be no.
Can you help me with the 260? I'm sorry.
Well, that's just that amount that you have as unassigned.
Yes, the unassigned amount. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
0.26 million.
Yep. That's in the agenda item. You're
Yep.
right. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, we could do whatever, we never had the discussion, so I didn't want to assume anything, so right now it's unassigned. If the board had a conversation or wanted to do something else with it, we're fine with that, obviously.
Yep, and I'm comfortable with that, knowing where we stand, so that's all.
Anna, Heather, Kevin, any questions?
Yeah, just a quick question about the teacher compensation system. I know in a past board meeting, we had quite a discussion about that and some of the schedule decisions that we have to be made. How long has that carried on in terms of budget item? Has this been
That
3-4
allocation,
years already?
yeah, that allocation started, I want to say about 650, and so it's been used a little bit.
Okay.
But, that's been since 16, 17, it was kind of being, implemented. I think it was fully implemented 20, do you remember, Gina? Okay.
But, just to, because, this is near and dear to me, and I want to make sure the teachers understand it, is that because it is that difference between one-time money and ongoing money. So it was money that we didn't have in year one, did not allocate because we wouldn't have had enough to follow through on the model for year 3. And so there's a provision in the model that talks about if we're not able to increase the schedule, then for folks in the blue level that we do give $1,000 stipend. And so the last time we did stipends, because stipends are one-time funds, we did take it from that line item. And so just so we haven't funded ongoing contract increases from that money because it is one-time money only. And I don't want to look at a teacher in 3 years and say, oh, we ran out of money. Your contract is going to be rolled back.
Have we done projections on how long we think this approximately $600,000 will be around, or is that a fluid situation depending on the number of teachers in this blue category?
Right. So it's dependent on a few things. One is we started out with about 37 teachers off schedule, meaning they were above our blue level. And so we have used it when we've done stipends for those teachers. And now that number is down to 29 because we had always hoped with retirement or the growth in the model that we could move those teachers on schedule. And that has helped, not as quickly as I would like, because we haven't had the continuing funds to increase that. So that number is dwindling, but that's hard for me to predict because it's really a function of how much we can increase the model. And then those stipends as well are provided when we're not able to increase the model. And so our goal is always to increase, my goal, I should say, is to increase the model because we're in such a competitive environment and our teachers are doing such an amazing job. But we know that is a function of bargaining and state funding. I don't know how to project that. Andy and I have talked about it, but we want the teachers to know that it is marked for them and it is there so that we can continue to fund those stipends if we should need to. But I would tell you my goal is not to do that.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions? Dr. Bergstrom, do you have anything to add?
Just want to underscore what Andy had put in the purple document, and that is the idea that he had it written out very well. It's important to note that spending fund balance for ongoing expenses is not generally fiscally responsible. However, and then he goes on to explain why the social workers would roll into the regular budget. The vast majority of our budget is about salaries. It's about salaries for the wonderful people who work for the Oregon School District. And without an increase in state budget, we can't add to their base. And so the one-time money looks like, wow, we're really rolling in it, but we're not in the sense of where it really matters, which is to show our staff that, we really appreciate them, that the community appreciates them, and add to their actual salary base.
All right, I will entertain a motion to act on the agenda item approval of the 2020-2021 assigned funds and use in the 2021-2022 budget. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Katie, can you call the roll?
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Mr. Mehring?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. We are done with action items. Moving on to E, discussion items, committee reports. We'll go through these briefly. Anna, policy.
No report from policy. Our next meeting is going to be scheduled on September 20th.
Okay, great. Moving on to vision steering, Troy.
No report from visioning. We'll have our next meeting in September.
Okay. Worth Woods, Tim.
We have not had a meeting since the last. We're putting that together sometime in the next couple of weeks. We're working around vacations.
Okay.
I think
Sounds good.
Andy could give a little update on
okay.
that, though. He had some good news today.
Okay, go
That's
ahead,
okay,
Andy.
that's okay. Yeah, so we do have our application in for our school woods with the Department of Natural Resources. We submitted that a week or so ago, waiting for them to contact us. That's kind of the next step to creating a forestry plan. The other component is I was actually in discussion with the Urban Brothers, and they are going to start the seeding part. They said the weather kind of in the forecast here is actually perfect, so they'll be working in that area in the next week, getting the seeding for the prairie down, and the prairie grass is installed. And then that should, they felt like this was the exact perfect time to start that process. We also did have a few trees around the Eco Center fall down with the storms that we had over the last week or two. To our knowledge, there's no damage at the house, but you actually have a hard time getting up the driveway at this point in time. So the urban folks were going to help us with kind of clearing that out of the way so that we can access the building. So.
Great, thanks, Andy. That's exciting news about the application. Okay, moving on to F, information items. Dr. Bergstrom, why don't we go through 1 and 2, and then we'll have questions, and then we'll take 3. Unless you want to do all 3 at the same? I'll leave it up to you when you want to take questions.
That's good, that's good. We'll go through 1 and 2. Thank you. So for visioning and strategic planning, this is a graphic that you're all familiar with, and I'll probably be putting it up quite frequently to make sure that everybody knows that we're involved in the process of visioning and strategic planning. And we have multiple things happening at once, including the Portrait of a Graduate process, where we've had 2 focus groups, leadership teams are giving input. Actually, the leadership teams are doing, I just want to put in a plug for them, really excellent work over the summer. I've been meeting with principals and talking to them about what is being generated from their leadership teams, and they're doing really amazing work with their theory of action, and also with developing goals that are connected to broader district priorities. So I just really want to commend their work. So they're a part of this process, and then when we get a little further along, the community and the students will have another opportunity before we get to the point where we have our graphic and our revised policy. Teaching and learning update, number 2. Our Back Together plan for the school year, where we're looking for a safe, high-quality, in-person experience with minimal disruption. That is our goal, and I'll say it over and over. That is what we are looking for. And to make that happen, we have 2 priorities, mental and physical wellness, and you heard that referred to frequently this evening, as well as high-quality teaching and learning. So I'll just do a few highlights from each of those priorities of the Back Together plan. So you'll see here, the first thing is continuing to expand our student services team, and we've spoken about our social workers, which are a really important part of the plan to support students and families. And I have a slide that's coming up next that tells you who we hired, because those wonderful people are in place. We also know the importance of prioritizing relationship building and building this culture of belonging and inclusion. And as a way to emphasize how important we believe that is, you already know we've implemented Ready, Set, Go conferences for our students in kindergarten through grade 8, and those are already underway. They started last week. So it's been great to have families come in to meet with teachers, to talk about the school year and all that is ahead of us. And we also are continuing with our Jumpstart program, because that's another piece that we've had for a long time that connects to relationship building and belonging and inclusion. So that's for our students in 5th grade, 7th grade, and 9th grade as they transition to new schools. And those programs were packed. At new teacher orientation, all of us were able to go downstairs and greet the freshmen, and I think we had, what is it, Mr. Planner, 270 freshmen?
Wow.
Yeah, so that isn't the whole class. Those are just the ones who came. So it was a really full gym. It was pretty exciting to see, and it's always a really nice way for new teachers to have that exciting experience in the middle of John Tanner's and my presentation. So we always look at it as a great way to break up a long time of talking. So I also want to point out that our building leadership teams are developing goals using the social emotional learning skills survey panorama. Really good specific goals being written based on what that survey tells us. I'm excited to be able to share some of that with you this fall. But our principals and leadership teams are doing great work in that area. And here are our 3 new social workers. And I know you say, wait, we only approved 2. And that's correct, because one is a new person who is replacing one of our social workers who left. So we were able to hire 3 people to the team this summer. Caitlin Peterson, Daniela Aravalo, and Amanda Sedlick. I'm going to have to remember how to pronounce her name, and I'm going to have to apologize to her tomorrow morning. They are joining us. They were here for new educator orientation, and we're really excited to have them. Physical wellness. We've spoken quite a bit about health and safety protocols, and we have been sharing those protocols directly with families. They are listed on our website. We also have been cementing our procedures for communicating regarding positive cases. So we will be notifying close contacts who may need to quarantine, and we know that in a masked environment, that's most likely to happen at lunch. So that will happen by phone call. There will be a notification to the entire classroom or the entire bus if there is a positive case. And we will be maintaining a district dashboard with cases and quarantines. So we won't be sending out emails to the whole district or the whole school, but we will be maintaining a dashboard so people can see all of the updated information. And we also have updated our plans for students who are quarantined and how they stay abreast of what's happening in schools. Grades 7 through 12, everything will be through the Google Classroom platform. But grades K through 6 have decided to go the way of live streaming for our quarantine students. So that is certainly a plus. High quality teaching and learning. Boy, we have a lot of really great things happening with our teachers and the collaboration time that they were able to have last year. All of the people who are still working this summer, because I really want to put in a plug for the fact that as difficult as last year was, a lot of our teachers are working all summer long too, to make sure that we are ready to address all of the needs that are coming to us in the fall. And one of the tools we'll be utilizing and learning more about is Universal Design for Learning, which is a framework that helps all of us as educators think on the front end how to make grade level standards accessible to all students, as opposed to designing a lesson and then having a special education teacher or a teacher from the ESL department make modifications that fit the needs of their students. It's designed from the beginning to be accessible to all students. So that's a really important flip on that thinking. We'll be using pre-unit assessments to make sure we understand what students understand. And if they're missing a prerequisite set of skills or knowledge, then we are grouping students based on what they need and doing just-in-time teaching, as opposed to making entire grades start from whatever we think they may have missed last year. So it's a way to address things more efficiently in a just-in-time manner. We're making sure all of our students have access to grade level content. Honestly, that's an equity issue. And embedding those supports for our students who need assistance with prerequisite skills. And then, of course, some consistency related to the tools, because our parents really told us how important that was. All right, that is 1 and 2, so we can stop now for questions.
Any questions for Dr. Bergstrom on those 2 areas? Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you for this, Dr. Bergstrom. Can you tell me a little bit more just on the regular teacher collaboration time? I know that was such a big win last year, and obviously not repeatable in the same way, since we're back to school 5 days a week, but I'd love to hear just a little bit more about that.
You bet. And I will ask Mr. Tanner or Ms. Krieger to make sure if I'm saying something incorrectly that they help me out with that. But we have worked it out, I believe, where it's every third Wednesday is when teachers across the district will have an opportunity for collaboration time. And then also with the middle school and the high school starting later, they will have morning time that they will be able to dedicate to that. Not a lot, but they will have some. And we are also being really deliberate with the utilization of our in-service time to allow for cross-district collaboration. Because people have, thankfully, our principals have always been really brilliant at designing schedules that allow people who teach similar classes, it depends on the configuration of the school, time to collaborate. What we really benefited from last year was people being able to collaborate across many schools. And so that's where that third Wednesday plan is coming in. And once again, it's really, I'm going to give credit to the principals for designing a system that allows that. At multiple levels, is allowing more collaboration time than we've had in the past.
Any other questions? Tim, did you have any? Okay. All right, moving on.
Okay, it's fall athletic safety protocols, and I've invited our athletic director, Mr. Carr, up to share a little bit with us about what is happening with fall athletics and the important safety protocols that are attached.
Hi, Mike.
Hello. So I just want to go over a couple of the safety protocols and give you an update. You had a pretty extensive update from me this week, so I hope you got a chance to look at those things. So our safety protocols that we'll be sharing with our parents and students, we've been sharing them with our students, but now that we're in competitions, we'll be sharing them with our parents this week. The key practices that we're going to work on are work daily. We've been working daily with the WIA, the Badger Conference, and our other schools that we work with on safety protocols. And as you know, as early as last week, those change daily. So with the different counties that we deal with, remember we have 16 schools in different counties and different villages and different cities. We've really been working hard and communicating with them to talk about the different protocols and procedures. We're going to make one change this fall. We're going to have the students take the Panther Pledge on their own and not do the electronic version. And then the coaches will also follow up with them daily to make sure that they are not experiencing any symptoms. Policy 565, which you're very familiar with, is what we will follow in regards to return and quarantines. So we will follow the same thing that our school children follow, as well as our staff. We will continue to do hygiene habits and enhance safety protocols. And as far as masks go, with the mask mandate, we will mask indoors and on all buses, because that's emergency order number 17. And due to federal requirements on buses. We'll mask optional for outside athletes and recommend for fans outside when social distancing is not possible. So if we have big groups, as in the same vein as UW and other large group gatherings, are still recommending masks if you cannot socially distance. And then we'll continue our communication with our COVID team with positive cases and tracing. The WIA is not requiring that we do as much, but we've kind of have a agreement with our schools that we work with that we'll continue to do what we did in the fall. And then one other thing that I think I shared with you, but we have about 40% of our officials are not coming back, either due to retirements or to COVID still. So we will still be struggling with that and moving games and doing some things that we haven't done in the past. So I just want people to be prepared for that. A good example is we play Madison West this Friday in football, but we had to move it to Thursday because we couldn't find any officials. And we've been looking for that for more than a year. So it wasn't something new. With that, I'll take questions.
Anyone have any questions for Mike? Go ahead, Tim.
So what are we doing to generate more officials? Is the WIAA offering more training? Are they making what's happening with regards to that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been on a couple national committees that have dealt with this issue, and it's not just a Wisconsin thing, and it hasn't always been. The pandemic has exacerbated that. We're trying to recruit more students into officiating once they graduate or once they finish their playing careers. It's just getting harder and harder because the environment is harder and harder. Not just in a COVID environment, but also just in a sportsmanship environment. And that's one of the reasons why I helped author the sportsmanship proposal that went through the WIA about fan behavior and doing those sort of things. So it's really hard. It's always been a razor thin. Ever since I've been officiating, I've been officiating 30 years. Ever since I've been officiating, it's always been a razor thin. Do you have enough or do you not have enough? So this has just totally changed the game. And I think like in any other industry, once you walk away, you kind of figure out like, oh, it's nice to have some time on my hands, right? So I think the coming back has also been a problem for some people.
Maybe the shortage will get parents to reconsider when extreme responses to bad calls are made, when it starts affecting the ability for their children to play,
I would hope so. It's a real problem.
Any other questions for Mike? Go ahead, Kevin.
I might have missed it daydreaming here, but the whole issue that we had last time with sports meet, we decided to play last season at the time, was other schools' policies.
Mm-hmm.
Did I miss that, or?
No, so what we've agreed to, because there aren't as many policies given to us by the WIAA, we've agreed to, at least in the Badger Conference, to go with the home schools policies and procedures. We feel that that's a good path.
Yep.
I think the other thing that with so many of our schools in Dane County, we all are under now the same kind of guidance.
Yep.
So, but I know as a group we work together really well. So if we have to change things, I know we can do that.
Yep. I support that, and it's logical as well, so I'm glad to hear.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Mike, if you want to stay just a minute, because in the superintendent's report, I think the first two slides are awards that are coming from your department, right? Oh, come on, the cute pic, there we go. So our OHS cheer team did an outstanding job at cheer camp last week. They earned a white outstanding level and a red excellence level ribbon for their performances, as well as the most improved team trophy. So fantastic job, OHS cheer. And a special shout out to the individual medal winners, Alice, Anna, Bree, Olivia, and Sam. So congratulations on that. And then we have experienced quite a few athletic honors in the past week. Want to point out that the WIAA Award of Excellence was granted to the Oregon High School, and that award salutes only 33 schools out of 500 that meet the criteria to be named recipients of the Award of Excellence in 2020-2021. The award promotes and recognizes the efforts and achievements of schools in the area of sportsmanship, ethics, integrity, leadership, and character. For the second straight year, schools and athletic administrators experienced additional challenges with the COVID pandemic to account for guidelines, accommodations, and schedule changes. So congratulations to our athletic department for the WIAA award. Our girls soccer team also won the Sportsmanship Award Honorable Mention. WIAA has selected the Team Sportsmanship Award winners for the 2021 Spring State Team Tournaments, and our girls soccer team received an honorable mention. So congratulations to them. And in addition, we've been awarded section final game host positions for girls basketball, girls golf, and girls basketball. So, or boys basketball, girls golf, girls basketball. So thank you very much. Just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to, oh wait, I forgot, third slide is you too. And that is the Athletic Coaches Book Club that has just been started. And I wanted to make sure that that was brought up tonight because it is really, really exciting. We have the vast majority of our coaches are involved in this. And it's a book study being run by two of our coaches, Ned Lease and Kevin May. And they are running sessions around this particular book, and then they are generating ideas as a group of coaches related to how they want to continue to improve their craft. And last week, they actually had the author of this book as a guest speaker at their meeting. So you can see some of the ideas on the screen, but I think this is just a great example of the importance of empowering really wonderful people, and they start running, and they do great work. You can see some of the things that they've already got cooking. No pun intended. Yeah, no pun intended.
Thank you.
And speaking of author visits, this one was really, really fun, and I saw several of you there. The OHS Equity Book Club, and that was Mr. Piavanetti from the high school did a great job of putting that together, and I know a lot of people helped him. But it wrapped up the summer read with an actual visit from the author of the book. The book is The Hate You Give, and the author is Kim Johnson. And what was that? Oh, yeah, thank you. You know why I said that? Because I watched The Hate You Give this weekend on television, so that's why I said it. This is My America. Oh my goodness, was that a good book, and so were the discussions that were generated from it, both in large group and in small group. So the speakers this year so far have been Oregon Youth Center Director Precious Woodley, Judge Everett Mitchell, who's also coming to the high school to do a back-to-school address this week, and then Kim Johnson, the author of This Is My America. And so Kim Johnson not only is now a really acclaimed author, but she's also the incoming interim vice provost of the University of Oregon. So Ms. Johnson has quite a few things happening in her life, and so the fact that she was willing to give us an entire night to talk about her book, and the focus of the book, which is a social justice focus with a really amazing lead character in the book who is an advocate for social justice at every level, and this person is a teenager. So it was a really great example to our students about the importance of standing up for what you believe. And then this last week, we welcomed all of our new educators. You can see 28 of them pictured here. There were 32 in total. And Cindy Hedstrom, our full release mentor, arranged for the entire new educator week. They had a lot of activities. The most important thing was that they walked away from that week feeling very glad they made the decision to come here. So here's one example, the first day, and for those of you who were able to be at the luncheon on Monday, you were able to see the results of some of this. But they did a scavenger hunt around the entire Oregon school district so that in teams of people, masked and in cars, they were able to travel around the district, see particular sites, understand the meaning of them, but also to spend time together. And what people have told me is that they have remained friends with the people that they spent this time with as they begin their career in Oregon. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you, Leslie. Any questions for Dr. Bergstrom about any of that? Okay, moving on to G, closing. Future agenda. Our next meeting is September 13th, so make sure you have that on your calendars. Please let me know if there's any agenda items that you would like listed. And then we'll probably have some additional things from policy and maybe some things from visioning, so we'll look forward to that. Moving on to checkout. I'll go around the room and see if anyone has anything for checkout. Kevin.
I need to confirm that I can address comments that were made by the public, not directly, but as a general rule of thumb.
You can address comments made by the public if they're speaking to something that's on the agenda. So if we had comments from the public tonight about the SRO was on the agenda, so that's when you can speak to that because it's publicly noticed. And so the reason being is the board should not be speaking to things that the public doesn't know hasn't been put on the agenda so they can attend.
Thanks for the clarification. I have nothing.
Gina, okay.
Good job. I have nothing to share then.
Anna.
No, just a big congrats to the athletic department on all of those accolades. That's really impressive and really great updates tonight, Dr. Bergstrom. I'm just excited for the upcoming school year, and this report tonight really just got me even more excited. So thanks for all of your great work.
All right. Heather. Troy.
I just want to quickly accentuate the Equity Book Club that went on this summer. Several of us participated in it, and it was really great. So a big thank you to Mr. Piovanetti and his team that put that together. Great way to bring the community together and involve students and have a really good discussion. So I really enjoyed it. That's all.
Great, thank you. Okay, the board will now be moving into closed session, so we'll take a recess. Let's give ourselves 2 or 3 minutes to run to the restroom, and then we'll convene in the conference room for our closed session. Thanks, everybody.